I never imagined confessing this, but these days, I find myself dreading the moments my husband reaches for me at night. The feel of his hand on my leg once sparked excitement. Now, it's a stark reminder of the emotional chasm between us. Mark isn't unkind or inconsiderate, he's simply absent in the ways that truly matter. He's physically here, of course, but emotionally distant, hidden behind long work hours, silent meals, and the glow of the television we seldom watch together. It wasn't like this initially. When we got married 7 years prior, I was convinced he was my soulmate. Having been a single mother for a long time, Mark's arrival, dependable, responsible, secure, felt like finally finding sanctuary. He brought structure and safety to my life. But somewhere down the line, he ceased to truly see me. I became like a fixture in the house, something requiring maintenance rather than evoking passion. Then Ryan, Mark's son from his previous marriage, came into the picture. He moved in with us a year ago after college, uncertain about his future path. His intended short stay stretched into a full year. And as the weeks turned into months, I began noticing things I shouldn't have. Initially, it seemed harmless. How he'd offer assistance in the kitchen while Mark was engrossed in his laptop. How he'd listen intently when I spoke about my day. He possessed a quiet self-assurance, not arrogance, just a grounded nature. And he saw me, not just casually, but with depth. His gaze would linger a fraction too long. His compliments, subtle as they were, stayed with me. I felt a vibrancy around him I hadn't experienced in years. The guilt was immediate. Every smile he offered sent a wave of warmth through me, followed instantly by shame. He was my stepson. Though he called me Claire, never Mom, the title itself felt like an uncrossable boundary. Mark seemed oblivious to this developing dynamic. Or perhaps he noticed but didn't care enough to comment. His focus was entirely on his job, late nights, business calls during dinner, falling asleep before I even switched off the light. It had been over a month since we were intimate, and even then, it felt perfunctory, a mechanical act. He touched my body, but never seemed to connect with my soul. One evening, following another quiet dinner, Mark retreated to his study to work. Ryan stayed behind, helping me clear the table. I clumsily dropped a glass, and as he reached to catch it, his hand brushed against mine. That brief, electric contact resonated far longer than appropriate. "Are you all right?" he inquired, his voice low and calm. I nodded rapidly, avoiding his gaze. But in that instant, something shifted. The spark, the palpable energy between us, was undeniable. It both terrified and exhilarated me. Later that night, lying beside Mark's soft snores, I stared at the ceiling. He was physically close yet emotionally miles away. My thoughts drifted to Ryan, his voice, his smile, the way he made me feel acknowledged. Pulling the blanket tighter, I tried to quell the yearning inside. I wasn't proud of these emotions, I hadn't sought them out, but they had found me in the void left by neglect and longing. The following morning, I avoided Ryan's gaze, immersing myself in chores, errands, anything to occupy my mind. But he wasn't unaware. He lingered slightly longer at the door when leaving. His eyes held questions I lacked the courage to address. I realized then that a line had been crossed, metaphorically speaking. No matter how hard I tried to ignore it, the reality of the situation was closing in. I told myself it was merely loneliness, a craving for attention, not specifically for him. Yet, deep down, I knew differently. It wasn't just Ryan's attention, it was how he made me feel relevant again, like a woman still desirable. Something hazardous had stirred within me, and I wasn't certain I wanted it to subside. For days, I fought the thoughts. I threw myself into laundry, grocery shopping, aimless social media scrolling, hoping distraction could cleanse my conscience. But despite reminding myself repeatedly that Ryan was forbidden territory, my physical reactions betrayed me. My heart would flutter at his approach, warmth would rise when our arms accidentally touched. Mark, predictably, remained unaware. Or perhaps he simply chose not to inquire why I seemed tense, distracted, and unusually quiet. If he observed anything, he opted for silence over confrontation. We maintained our routines, morning coffee, quiet dinners, separate evenings, but lived separate lives. Our shared existence had become a rhythm devoid of melody. Then the storm arrived. Thunder rumbled as heavy rain began that evening. Mark called from his office. A last-minute project would detain him. I didn't ask for an ETA, I knew better than to wait up. Curling up on the couch with a blanket and a movie, I let the rain mask the house's silence. Ryan appeared in the doorway with 2 mugs of hot chocolate, an inquisitive arch in his eyebrow. "Watching this by yourself?" A smile escaped me unintentionally. "Seems that way." He sat beside me, close, yet maintaining a small distance, and handed me a mug. The warmth spread through my hands, but a different kind of heat arose from my acute awareness of his proximity. Suddenly, the storm knocked out the power, plunging the room into darkness. The screen went black. We sat in silence, illuminated only by a candle I'd lit earlier. "It feels cozy like this," he remarked, his voice softer in the dark. I nodded, acutely aware of the sudden intimacy of the situation. The storm outside seemed to suspend the rules within. I could feel his gaze on me, but I didn't look back, afraid of what he might see in my eyes, and what I might see in his. Then, he gently reached out, tucking a stray piece of hair behind my ear. "Claire," he whispered. Just my name, yet the way he uttered it sent tremors through me. I turned towards him, my heart pounding. There was no mistaking his look now, no pretending it was mere stepmotherly affection or innocent closeness. The air crackled with unspoken tension. I should have moved, should have reminded both of us about the lines we couldn't cross. But I remained still. He leaned in slowly, deliberately, as if giving me a chance to refuse. I didn't. Our lips met, hesitant at first, then deepening, filled with a hunger I had suppressed for so long. The mug slipped from my hand, hitting the carpet softly. I didn't care. Thought dissolved, only feeling remained, every nerve ignited, every breath drawn towards him. That night, I broke a promise I never thought I would. When it ended, we didn't speak. He kissed my forehead, a surprisingly tender act, before retreating to his room. I sat alone in the dim candlelight, wrapped in the blanket, my thoughts racing like the storm outside. I should have felt disgusted, should have wept, panicked, confessed. Instead, all I felt was alive, dangerously, shamefully alive. Hours later, I slipped into bed beside Mark. He didn't stir, his breathing even, his back to me. I watched him for a time, wondering how we had reached this point. We had constructed a life of predictability and routine, but within its cracks, something untamed had grown, something I could no longer deny. The next morning, the sun shone, the storm forgotten. Mark left for work, noticing nothing amiss. Over breakfast, Ryan and I avoided eye contact. The silence between us was laden with unspoken meaning. But a certainty had taken root within me, this wasn't finished. A door had been opened, and I had stepped through. Whatever lay ahead, there was no turning back. The following days were a careful ballet of avoidance. Ryan maintained his distance, I feigned indifference. Yet, every chance encounter, by the sink, in the hallway, near the stairs, held an undercurrent, a silent acknowledgment of our shared secret. One night, one moment, had altered everything. Mark remained unchanged, oblivious to the currents shifting around him. His habitual morning kiss on my cheek, his routine questions about groceries, his perfunctory touch at night, it all continued. I started to question if he had ever truly perceived me, or if I had merely imagined our connection was more than a functional partnership within shared walls. For a while, I attempted to reconnect with him. I wore the perfume he once complimented, prepared his favorite meal, even initiated intimacy, hoping to rekindle some spark. But it was like kissing cardboard, flat, devoid of moisture. The actions were there, but the emotion had vanished long ago. Lying awake afterward, feeling empty and unfulfilled, I wondered how long I could sustain this pretense. With Ryan, it had been different. There was fire, a feeling of being wanted, seen, consumed, not just physically, but wholly. It wasn't merely the thrill of the forbidden or the risk involved, it was the profound yearning to feel something, anything, again. I found myself comparing them, even unwillingly. Mark's touch felt cold, detached, practiced. Ryan's had been urgent, needy, almost worshipful. And the guilt that should have overwhelmed me by now hadn't fully materialized. One evening, I found myself standing outside Ryan's bedroom door, heart racing. I didn't knock, just stood there, questioning who I was becoming, wife, stepmother, a woman fractured. Ryan opened the door unexpectedly. He paused upon seeing me, his expression a mixture of surprise and something unreadable. Shirtless, hair damp from a shower, his chest rose and fell with controlled breaths. No words were exchanged. I turned and walked away. That was the final time we were alone in a room together. The tension became almost unbearable. I began finding excuses to be out of the house during the day, long walks, lengthy grocery trips, anything to escape the confines that seemed to hold too many secrets. Mark noticed my withdrawal but attributed it to stress. He proposed a weekend getaway, just the two of us, a chance to reconnect. I forced a smile and agreed, not out of a desire to mend things, but to convince myself I hadn't completely surrendered. The weekend was a failure, forced small talk, uncomfortable silences. Lying awake one night in a hotel bed that felt even colder than our own, listening to his snores, I mourned a version of myself that was gone. Upon our return, a sense of resignation settled within me, not peace. Leaving wasn't an option, not yet, not without dismantling the entire family structure. But remaining unchanged was impossible too. I had to bear the weight of my actions and, more troublingly, my continued desires. A few weeks later, Ryan announced he'd found a job in another city and would be moving out by month's end. I nodded and offered congratulations. Mark clapped him on the back, expressing pride. I maintained a steady smile, though my chest felt like it was quietly collapsing beneath the table. On the morning of his departure, I watched him load his car from an upstairs window. He didn't look back. Perhaps it was less painful that way. I returned to bed. Mark was already downstairs, on the phone, making breakfast, proceeding with his life. I pulled the covers over my head, breathing in the silence. I've never discussed it since, not with Ryan, not with Mark, not even fully admitting it to myself. But the memory of that night persists in the quiet hours, the stolen glances, the hunger, the whispered name. It wasn't love, I understand that now. But it was genuine, raw, human. And for a woman who had felt invisible for so long, it was sufficient to remind me I still existed. I still lie beside my husband each night. But sometimes, in the darkness, I close my eyes and recall the feeling of being truly wanted.